I am just outside Port-au-Prince, where thousands of Haitians are taking to the street protesting the government's response to the earthquake that destroyed southern Haiti. That's what we're likely to say in the coming months and years, because Haiti's recovery from this most recent earthquake faces a fundamental economic problem. And the challenge is that it's at odds with a political problem. Together, we are likely to see a scandal. The problem started on August 14th, 2021, when an earthquake hit the southern peninsula of Haiti. The earthquake's magnitude was a 7.2, which was roughly the same magnitude of what hit Haiti back in 2010. The biggest difference is that the epicenter of the 2010 earthquake was over here, near the largest population center. In 2021, the earthquake hit around here. It's a little hard to get too accurate with this map given that it's just a carving, but it hit over in a less densely populated area of the country. The difference in the epicenters had a huge difference in the damage these earthquakes caused. This one in 2010, even though it was roughly the same size, killed about 200,000 people. The one here in 2021 has killed about 2,000 people. Huge difference in where people are located, and as a result, a huge difference in the amount of damage done. And maybe you're asking yourself, why does Haiti have so many earthquakes? Well, the Enriquillo Plantain Garden fault line runs right through the southern peninsula. Earthquakes are not a new phenomenon. They have been affecting Haiti since it was a French colony. In fact, in 1770, there was an earthquake that hit near Port-au-Prince that killed hundreds of people. And that was a big deal when the population was so small. But more importantly, when I think back to 1770, the main cause of earthquake deaths was the same cause that we had both in 2010 and what we're seeing in 2021. And that's possibly scandalous. When we compare the 1770 earthquake and the 2021 earthquake, we might see the first signs of a scandal. After the 1770 earthquake, Port-au-Prince needed to reconstruct itself, but there was an important caveat. No masonry, no buildings to be made out of bricks or cinder blocks. Everything had to be made out of wood. Bricks are a major earthquake risk. The mortar that holds them together just isn't strong enough to withstand the shaking. And when they do fall, their weight crushes the residents. So the first scandal is that for 250 years, Haiti has known that it is prone to earthquakes and that a solution is to avoid making houses out of cinder blocks. Yet, what is the most popular material to use when constructing homes? Why are cinder blocks so popular? Well, because of the economics. What are the benefits of using cinder blocks? Well, one of the main ones is that they protect against bad weather. And when there aren't earthquakes, they're fairly strong. And what are the costs? It's cheaper than the alternatives. Lumber and steel are both expensive. Cinder blocks can be made out of materials that are widely available. And of course, there are ways to cut costs on making those cinder blocks to make them even cheaper. Of course, that makes them even more dangerous when there's an earthquake, but even though there have been 2 earthquakes in the last 11 years, they're actually pretty rare. Before 2010, the last major earthquake on this fault line happened back in 1770. Historically, the probability of an earthquake wrecking your house has just not been high enough to justify the cost of a more expensive home. So economics drove Haiti to have way too many block homes, even when we knew that they were dangerous. Does that sound like a scandal? Maybe a little, but Haiti isn't the only place that has this problem. Here in Utah, 20% of homes are made from unreinforced bricks. Around my campus, there are brick homes everywhere, and I imagine if we got hit by a large enough earthquake, those would crumble. In fact, last year, Utah had a 5.7 magnitude earthquake, which is much, much smaller than what hit Haiti. When you look at the pictures of Utah's aftermath, it's all piles of bricks. Can Haiti do better? Absolutely, we should be building better homes in Haiti, but it's not a Haiti-specific problem. But that's not the scandal that I think is coming out of this earthquake. The real scandal is going to be caused by a different economic problem. To demonstrate this problem, here is a country with 2 cities and an earthquake hits right in the middle of them. These cities need aid. They need medical resources, construction materials, various other things. So these resources start pouring into the cities. From our bird's eye view, these cities look like they're in equal need. So we try to split these resources evenly. But if we were to get in on the ground level, we would see that one of these cities is in much greater need than the other. How are we supposed to know which of these cities is in greater need? Well, that's one of the fundamental questions of economics. How do we allocate scarce resources to their highest value use? The classic solution is to use markets. The city that is in the greatest need of doctors will pay more for them. Prices will allocate the resources to their greatest use. But this is not how we allocate resources. More commonly, aid agencies survey the scene, they send the resources where they see fit, and this causes tons of problems. The biggest indiscretion from 2010 was when the Red Cross raised $500 million and spent it on building 6 houses. Now that's a little bit of a hyperbole. That's the work that the Red Cross did directly. Most of that money was directed towards other aid agencies, but there was still a big problem with coordination and sending resources to their highest value use. What we need is some sort of market mechanism, a way to allocate the resources that gets people to truthfully reveal what they need. Because you can't just ask people what they need. It's very easy to lie. That's why prices work so well. You can lie, but when it comes time to actually pay up, you're facing a huge opportunity cost. Well, what's stopping us from using prices? The biggest problem is that after a disaster, the people who are in the greatest need are the ones who are least capable of paying the prices that show how much they need. They just lost everything. Is there a way to solve this problem? Economists have already solved this problem in other markets that can't use prices, like at food banks. Feeding America distributes over 300 million pounds of food to over 200 food banks across the United States. The problem Feeding America faces is that the food banks that are in the greatest need are also the food banks that can't afford to buy food in an auction. Sounds like a familiar problem. So what Feeding America decided to do was create its own auction using its own currency. Each food bank received a set of credits according to the general needs of that population. But when different types of donations would arrive, each food bank could bid using those credits. Food banks were able to express what they needed most, and because of that, the allocation of food across food banks improved incredibly. Maybe a place like Haiti could use a similar distribution system. They could work with local leaders, set up an auction, and give each community credits. Those local leaders then could survey the needs in their area and then bid on the donations that have been made available. Unfortunately, I don't think Haiti is on path to implement this kind of solution. Instead, the government thinks it knows what to do here, and that's where I'm worried there's going to be a scandal. The government of Haiti, which just lost its president a month ago, wants all aid and resources directed through the Government Office of Civil Protection. Now, in some ways, I can see the government's vision. Back in 2010, one of the biggest barriers to recovery was a coordination problem across agencies. A lot of people wanted to help. They came to donate their time and their resources, yet they had no local expertise, so they couldn't direct their resources properly. A lot of resources were just wasted because of poor coordination. Maybe the government can do a better job of assessing local needs, improving coordination, and doing better than what we saw in 2010. But there's a much bigger problem. Government officials will be tempted to use these resources to satisfy political needs, or they'll just steal them. That happened last time in 2010 when the government took out a $2 billion loan from Venezuela to put towards recovery. Yet none of that went to the recovery. Instead, it was embezzled and squandered. The missing Venezuela money caused the entire country to shut down in 2019. Will we see the same thing happen with the government trying to exercise more control over the distribution of aid and recovery resources? Maybe. That's why I'd like to see a broader approach and hopefully some market-based innovation. Haiti, si vous voulez parler concernant tout ça. If you want to understand more about what's going on in Haiti today, go ahead and check out this video about the assassination of President Jovenel Moïse.